Shalom and welcome everybody, mainly our speakers from overseas. It's a pleasure having you here, including with many of my friends, some of them from the Knesset, that nobody knew that we are going to meet here together, otherwise we could continue some meetings that we had to cut during afternoon. But thank you for those who are inviting all of us. But here we are for different reasons, and I'll try in the coming 10-15 minutes just to share some experience, I believe, that you gather over years. It's only 45 years since I started my service in the military Israeli IDF, and we just shared with Pete some stories about Iraq and about Gaza or Israel or West Bank, Syria, and all other enemies that surrounding Israel. And we do understand that never mind if it's in the US or in Israel or in any other country, but normally we are countries, democratic countries. In this region, we are the only democratic country that insists to not just to survive. We have an history of 3,500 years, and we missed this area for 2,000 years when we, by force, were expelled from Israel and from Jerusalem. And we just commemorate the destruction of the temple last Sunday. But 68 years ago, we not just returned to the state of Israel, we established it. And when we ask ourselves, what's the main problem that we are facing with our neighbors, mainly here in the piece of land between the Mediterranean and the Jordan Valley? And I think the main difference is the way that we, the Israelis, the Jewish people, came from so many countries to build our country here in Israel. We, or let's say our parents and grandparents, all of them were refugees. People who came from North Africa, Morocco, Tunis, Algeria, from Egypt, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, East Europe, all of them literally left behind their assets. In some countries, mainly in East Europe, they left all their families that got killed, murdered in the Shoah, in the Holocaust. And they came to Israel, and I myself, as a son of parents who survived the Holocaust, but lost all their family members, and I myself, I was named Avraham Moshe after my grandfather, who murdered in the Shoah. And we all remember that at home, nobody mentioned and nobody heard the word refugee. Because refugee is not just a status, it's a state of mind. In one of my meetings with the leaders of the Palestinian Authority, they asked me, Avi, what do you think is our main obstacle to go forward? And I told them, your main problem is the fact that you are taking the word refugee and the status refugee, you translate it into a state of mind, and you fell in love with it. You don't want to get rid of it. And once you continue defining yourself refugee, and we speak 68 years after the establishment of the State of Israel. And in 1950, when the United Nations had the first survey about refugee camps in Gaza Strip, there were 170,000 Palestinian refugees. Today, 2016, in the same 8 refugee camps in Gaza Strip, there are 520,000 refugees. And all of them are sponsored by the United Nations, the UNRWA, for Palestinian refugees. And that's their obstacle, which creates an obstacle to the whole region. And I told them, it's like a car, the best car you can imagine, a Mercedes or a Chevy, that is stuck in a reverse shift. You want to drive forward, but it goes backward. And as long as you, the Palestinian, you continue defining yourself refugees, you'll be stuck. And we here in Israel, we understand it. You know, I just checked. All countries around us, almost all of them, grosso modo, were established in the 40s. We were established in 48. The other are 46, 42, 44, sorry. Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, post the kingdom in 52. Look what happened. Look the state of Israel, how it looks like. And look all the country around us. Lebanon is a crisis due to Hezbollah. Syria is farfallen, is getting lost. Jordan is shaking. Egypt twice, a revolution and a military coup. I know that people are rejecting when I say a military coup. I remember in my event in the US, I spoke about the military coup in Egypt launched by Abdel Fattah Sisi, the current president, and one in the crowd raised his hand and said, Avi, I beg to differ. It was not a military coup. I said, what was it? He said it was a revolution. I said, who said it? He said, Sisi himself stated it's a revolution and not a military coup. I looked at him and said, you know, it reminded me of the story about the Jewish shtetl in Poland when the moil, how do you say moil in... the moil, no, the circumcised. When he, in his window of his office, put a cake, a huge cake with 3 floors with cream and candies and marshmallows, and people told him, Rabbi Moshe, why do you put, Rabbi Moshe, why do you put such a cake in your window? And he looked at them and said, what do you want me to put there? So what do you expect Sisi to say about what happened in Egypt? If he says military coup, there's a cut of the $1.5 billion military help to Egypt. But when we look around to those countries, how they look like today, 60-something, 70-something years post-established, and we look at the state of Israel, we understand the differences. We are enjoying $38,000 per capita GDP, while in Jordan it's 5,000 and something dollars. Egypt is less. Syria today is total loss. Lebanon for sure. And we do know that it didn't go very easily over the years. There are some people here who were fighters during the independence war and post-independence war. And they know and we know that 1% of the Jewish population in 48 during the independence war, 1%, 6,000 Israelis got killed, 6,000 amongst 600,000 people. But nevertheless, we continued building our country. And for the last 43 years, since the Yom Kippur War, all Israelis' wars and battles are against terror organizations. Because countries, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, understood there's no way to conquer the state of Israel. So if there's no way to conquer the state of Israel, let's try to talk about a peace treaty, like Egypt did, like Jordan did. Syria, I don't know what will happen in the future, what kind of Syria we're going to have. We always say that Lebanon will follow Syria one step behind. But meanwhile, we are facing a tough flow of terror organizations that used to be traditional terror organizations, but over the years became army of terrorists. Hezbollah, to define Hezbollah as a terror organization, it's a mistake. Although 19 Arab countries, for the first time, 19 Arab countries amongst 22, 3 months ago, defined Hezbollah as a terror organization due to what they are doing in Syria. More than 500,000 Syrians got killed during the last 5 years. More than 500,000 people. So 19 Arab countries, for the first time in history, defined Hezbollah as a terror organization. The 3 Arab countries who didn't do it are Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. 3 countries that are dominated by Iran. The mother of the terror movements, the mother of terror armies, the biggest state of terror in the world. But during the last 23 years, we started to face a new dimension of terrorists, the suicide bombers. We do have during the last year a wave of terror attacks launched by terrorists with knives, with car, who bumped into a group of Israelis or single Israelis. Here and there, attacks by guns or submachine guns. All of them knew that the probability that they're going to survive post the attack is very poor. But in order to be killed, they killed first an Israeli person, by knife, by any other tool. Suicide bombers, they first kill themselves. And then, by killing themselves, they are killing other people. And we suffered a tough blow with suicide bombers over the last 15 years. And I remember that some people in Israel told me, Avi, I was at that time head of Shin Bet, they told me, Avi, it's a lost case. We don't have any tool against it. And we just talked, Pete and me, about the meaning of the wall, the fence that we deployed along the West Bank. And I told him that in intelligence business, unlike mathematics, in regular mathematics, 1 + 1 is 2. In intelligence, 1 + 1 is 11. Because every terrorist that comes to cross from Tulkarem to Netanya, normally 15 minutes by car, but if he has to go, due to the wall that was built there, he has to go to Ramallah, and from Ramallah to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to go down to carry out his mission and to explode himself with a bomb in Netanya, he needs at least 4 or 5 people to assist him. Now every single person who assists him has one friend, good friend, that he shares a secret with. So that's how you get the option to get some information about what's going to happen. This one is telling to his friend, the other one is calling another friend, and by making mistakes, Shin Bet, police, and other organizations, the Israel Army, are collecting the information, translating it into action items, and foiling the attack. And I know that people in Israel are still very nervous about the system that one terrorist, by entering to a closed room, can kill tens of Israelis. To remind you, the last straw at the second Intifada was at the Passover night. Try to imagine that we are sitting in a hotel and they were sitting in March 27th, 2002. We're sitting exactly like we are in the dining room of a hotel in Netanya, Park Hotel in Netanya, and a suicide bomber came in and detonated himself and killed 30 people and 150 got injured. Then we decided to change the rule in fighting terrorists. Not just targeted killings, but mainly entering all refugee camps, neighborhoods, villages, to change terrorists' timetable. Instead of sparing 95% of the time to carry out terror attacks and 5% of the time to survive, to hide themselves, now they had to spare 95% of the time to hide themselves and only 5% to carry out terror attacks. That's the change. That makes a huge change. And I know that in Israel, we are, whenever we have a session of terror attacks, we are trying to frighten ourselves. And we right away, we call it the third intifada and the third temple is in danger and so on and so on. I don't know how you are familiar with the Israelis, Pete. I'm telling you, Israelis sometimes they are trying to think about the worst case scenario. And it reminded, the joke about a couple of Israelis who are going to the doctor because the wife had to go through a test in a CT machine, and they went to the doctor to hear the results. So I don't know how it's in the US. Here the jokes are mainly about Polish people, and I'm Polish. And anyway, she's telling him, my dear husband, I am too nervous to go to the doctor. I'll wait in the car, you go and get the results for me. And he gets into the clinic, half an hour, an hour and a half. He comes out, get into the car, and she shouts at him, "Where have you been an hour and a half? What did you do with the doctor for such a long time?" He said, "Bronya, let's go home, I'll tell you at home." "No, I want to know now, and we are not moving from here up until I get the results." He looked at her and said, "Bronya, your mother is moving to live with us." She looked at him and said, "What does the doctor has to do with my mother?" He said, "I don't know, but he said we have to be prepared for the worst case scenario." So we always love to go to the worst case scenario. I can assure you that you are visiting, it's the second time you are in Israel. Your wife is the first time. In order to be the second time, you have to be the first time. And I can assure you that you'll hear probably from many people about how things are very difficult here and how complicated it's here. But whenever you ask Israeli who is traveling to the US, to China, to Australia, or to London, when you ask him, "Where are you going tomorrow?" he says, "I'm going home." Because home, there's only one place labeled by the word home. That's here in the state of Israel. Thank you very much.